Welcome to the web of deception, a tale of betrayal, resilience, and unexpected alliances. In the cutthroat world of corporate empires, Helena Montenegro believed her company was untouchable, until a bold young stranger shattered that illusion with a shocking revelation. But who can you trust when betrayal lurks in plain sight? Stay tuned as we unravel a gripping story of power, deception, and redemption that will leave you questioning every move. The towering glass building of Montenegro Corporation reflected the golden afternoon sun, standing as a symbol of power and success. Helena Montenegro, known for her elegance and unshakable leadership, adjusted her tailored blazer as she prepared for an important board meeting. Every detail mattered. Her image was as polished as the marble desks in her office. But as she reviewed her mental notes, a commotion broke out in the corridor. The glass doors of the main lobby swung open abruptly. A young woman, dressed in tattered clothes and clutching a worn folder, stormed past the security guards with surprising determination. Her presence was jarring, an anomaly in the pristine environment. The receptionist attempted to stop her, but the woman's voice rang out, firm yet desperate. "I need to speak with Ms. Montenegro. It's urgent." Helena glanced toward the disturbance, her brows furrowing. "Who is this?" she asked. Roberta, her assistant, appeared beside her. "She's someone from the streets, I think. She claims to have something important to share." Helena hesitated. Her first instinct was to dismiss the intruder, but something in the woman's stance felt oddly genuine. She gestured subtly. "Bring her in." The young woman entered, her step steady despite the weariness etched on her face. She held the folder tightly, like a shield. "My name is Lorena," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I found discarded documents that show serious irregularities in the contract you're about to sign." The room fell silent. Helena stared at the papers Lorena had spread across her desk. Phrases like asset transfer and unilateral liability leapt off the page. They felt familiar yet troubling. But she couldn't simply trust a stranger with wild claims. "Do you realize the gravity of what you're saying?" Helena asked, crossing her arms. Her tone was sharp, calculated, but her mind was racing. "Yes, I do," Lorena replied, holding her gaze. "That's why I'm here. I have nothing to gain, but you needed to know." Roberta, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "Helena, maybe we should at least take a closer look. The way she's describing these terms, it's not something anyone would just make up." Helena paused. As much as she hated to admit it, Roberta had a point. Something about Lorena's confidence felt hard to dismiss. "Fine," Helena said at last, picking up the papers. "I'll look into this myself. Roberta, contact legal and have them review the contract immediately." "Yes, ma'am," Roberta replied, hurrying out of the room. Lorena exhaled slightly, but Helena wasn't ready to let her off. "Why?" Helena asked, her voice softer now. "Why risk everything to bring this to me?" "Because I know what it's like to lose everything," Lorena said quietly. "And if I can stop someone else from going through that, I will." Before Helena could respond, Roberta returned with urgency. "Helena, legal says there's something unusual in the latest terms." Helena's grip tightened on the phone. A faint unease began to settle in. The glass-walled office that overlooked the city had seen countless victories. But for the first time, Helena Montenegro felt a sliver of doubt creep in. She sat in her leather chair, the papers Lorena had brought resting heavily in her hands. The words on the pages lingered in her mind, poking at the unshakable confidence she had spent years building. Helena's journey to success wasn't an accident. She had fought her way through the corporate jungle, refusing to let anyone question her authority. Her reputation as a shrewd, no-nonsense leader was a badge of honor. But as she thought about Lorena's claim and the urgency in her voice, Helena couldn't help but wonder. Had her confidence blinded her to a trap? Memories of her rise to power flooded her mind. She remembered late nights poring over contracts, moments of triumph as she outmaneuvered competitors, and the pride she felt when she stood as the face of Montenegro Corporation. She had built an empire that was untouchable, or so she believed. But now, with whispers of betrayal surrounding her, Helena questioned whether she had become too comfortable at the top. Was her trust in old alliances, particularly with Mauricio Lacerda, misplaced? She glanced at the documents again, her brow furrowing. The idea that her empire could be vulnerable felt like a slap to her carefully constructed image. Helena vowed to get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. Roberta leaned against her desk, the unease from earlier still gnawing at her. The young woman, Lorena, had left a strange impression. Her confidence and the specificity of her claims didn't seem like the ramblings of someone desperate for attention. There was something deliberate about her words. Unable to shake her curiosity, Roberta began skimming through the digital version of the contract Lorena had referenced. At first glance, everything appeared standard, but the deeper she went, the more unusual details began to emerge. Certain clauses were worded ambiguously, leaving room for interpretations that could shift legal responsibility and financial losses entirely onto Helena. Her chest tightened as she realized Lorena might be right. Roberta knew better than to bring this directly to Helena without evidence. Her boss valued precision above all else, and a misstep could cost her trust. But the stakes were too high to ignore. She needed answers, and one person might have more than she could find in a contract: Lorena herself. That evening, Roberta left the sleek Montenegro Corporation headquarters and ventured into the bustling streets, heading toward the area where Lorena had said she lived. Her shoes clicked against the pavement as she scanned the crowded sidewalks for any sign of the girl. "Lorena," she called, her voice catching against the hum of the city. The decision to trust a stranger felt risky, but Roberta knew that, for Helena's sake, it was worth taking the chance. The cold evening air carried a mixture of street sounds as Roberta wandered through a dimly lit part of the city. It was a stark contrast to the polished, high-rise world she was used to. Her eyes scanned the crowded sidewalks, lingering on the faces of those passing by. Finally, near a small alley, she spotted Lorena sitting on a step, clutching the same worn folder she had brought to Helena's office. "Lorena," Roberta called, her tone firm but cautious. The young woman looked up, startled, before recognizing her. "What are you doing here?" Lorena asked, pulling her folder closer. "I need to know more," Roberta said, stepping closer. "You weren't wrong about the contract. There are inconsistencies, and I need your help to understand how you know all of this." Lorena hesitated. Her sharp eyes studied Roberta, as if trying to determine if this was a trap. Finally, she sighed and gestured to the step beside her. "All right, but you're not going to like what I have to say." As the city buzzed around them, Lorena recounted how she had come across the discarded documents. She explained her sharp eye for legal terms, honed from years of reading discarded papers while surviving on the streets. Roberta listened intently, the gravity of the situation becoming clearer. By the end of their conversation, Roberta knew one thing for sure. Lorena wasn't just guessing. She had uncovered something real. Roberta sat quietly, letting Lorena's story sink in. "How does someone living on the streets know so much about legal contracts?" she asked cautiously, though her voice held no malice. Lorena leaned back against the cold wall. "I wasn't always like this," she began, her voice soft. "I wanted to study law. I even started working toward it, but life doesn't always go the way you plan." Roberta could see the weight of those words on Lorena's face. "My parents kicked me out when I was barely out of high school. I ended up here, surviving however I could. I realize that what people throw away says more than what they keep," Lorena explained. Her fingers traced the edges of the folder as she spoke. Legal documents, financial reports, contracts. Companies discard things carelessly. I taught myself to read between the lines. There was a quiet intelligence in Lorena, one that Roberta couldn't ignore. "And this," Roberta gestured to the folder. "This," Lorena said with a small, bitter smile, could ruin Helena if she doesn't act fast. That contract isn't just dangerous, it's a trap. Roberta nodded slowly. She didn't doubt Lorena anymore. If Helena wanted to protect her empire, they couldn't afford to brush this off. "Come with me," Roberta said firmly. "If we're going to stop this, you'll need to tell Helena everything yourself." Lorena hesitated, then stood, determination in her eyes. The following morning, Helena sat at her desk, her gaze fixed on the papers in front of her. Sleep had been scarce, and her mind was clouded by the possibilities Lorena's claims had stirred. Roberta stood by her side, quietly placing a fresh cup of coffee on the table. "I've been digging into the contract," Roberta began. "There are clauses that don't align with the company's standard agreements. Some terms are vague, and they shift an unusual amount of liability onto us." Helena's brow furrowed. She prided herself on her vigilance, yet these details had slipped through. "And you think this is deliberate?" she asked. Roberta hesitated. "I can't be certain, but it's suspicious, especially considering Lorena's findings." Helena leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Mauricio Lacerda wouldn't risk his reputation on something this reckless," she murmured. "He's been a trusted partner for years." "Maybe he's counting on that trust," Roberta said gently, her voice measured. The suggestion hung in the air, heavy and unwelcome. Helena didn't respond, but tapped her fingers on the desk, her mind spinning. "Lorena's waiting outside," Roberta added after a moment. "She's willing to go over everything with you." Helena's lips pressed into a thin line. She wasn't accustomed to relying on outsiders, let alone someone from the streets. But the stakes were too high to ignore. "Fine," she said at last. "Bring her in." As Roberta left, Helena glanced at the contract again. Could Mauricio really be capable of betrayal? Lorena entered the office with cautious steps, clutching her worn folder as if it were armor. Helena watched her intently, her sharp eyes scanning the young woman for any signs of dishonesty. "You have my attention," Helena said, gesturing for Lorena to sit. "Now explain in detail what you found." Lorena hesitated, then opened her folder and spread out the papers on the desk. Her voice was steady as she pointed to specific clauses. "Here, this section transfers liability entirely to you if there's a breach. And this," she said, tapping another part, "allows them to claim your assets if certain financial thresholds aren't met." Helena leaned forward, her expression hardening as she studied the highlighted sections. She hated admitting it, but the inconsistencies were undeniable. "Where exactly did you find these?" Helena asked. "In a trash bin outside one of Mauricio's branch offices," Lorena replied. "It looked like someone was trying to get rid of old drafts, but they didn't shred them properly." Helena's lips tightened. The carelessness infuriated her. But what troubled her more was the potential depth of the deception. "And why bring this to me?" Helena asked, her voice colder now. "What do you stand to gain?" Lorena met her gaze, unflinching. "Nothing. I just know what it's like to lose everything, and I don't want that to happen to you." For the first time, Helena found herself unsure of what to say. Helena sat in silence after Lorena left, staring at the documents spread across her desk. The implications were disturbing, and though she hated to admit it, the young woman's findings were far too detailed to be mere speculation. Her trust in Mauricio, once unshakable, now felt precarious. "Roberta," Helena said, breaking the quiet, "I need you to dig deeper. Check his emails, meeting notes, anything that might confirm or deny these claims." Roberta nodded. "I'll start immediately." As Roberta began combing through the company's digital archives, the tension in the office was palpable. At first, everything appeared routine. Standard memos, financial projections, and scheduling details. But as Roberta delved deeper into private correspondences, small irregularities began to emerge. One email thread in particular caught her attention. It referenced contingency plans and asset reallocation with ambiguous wording that suggested something more than simple business strategy. Roberta's pulse quickened as she pieced together bits of information that hinted at a scheme to exploit Montenegro Corporation's assets under specific circumstances. It wasn't solid proof, but it was enough to make her uneasy. Returning to Helena's office, Roberta placed a printout of the emails on her desk. These could mean nothing or everything, she said cautiously. Helena scanned the pages, her face unreadable. But inside, a storm was brewing. "We need more," she said firmly. "If this is true, I want undeniable evidence." By the end of the day, the atmosphere at Montenegro Corporation had shifted noticeably. Helena's usual confidence seemed tempered, and employees whispered among themselves about the strange energy in the air. The board members, sensing something was amiss, began subtly inquiring about the status of the deal with Mauricio. Helena deflected their questions with practiced ease, but her answers lacked the conviction they usually carried. In a private meeting with Roberta, Helena shared her growing unease. "The timing of this deal, the pressure to close, it all feels calculated," she admitted. Roberta hesitated. "You've worked with Mauricio for years. Do you think he could really be behind this?" Helena's jaw tightened. "I don't know. That's what makes it so dangerous." Meanwhile, the markets began to take notice. Subtle shifts in Montenegro Corporation stock prices hinted at growing uncertainty. Speculative articles appeared online, questioning delays in the high-profile partnership. Mauricio, ever the polished businessman, reached out to Helena. "I'm hearing concerns," he said smoothly during a phone call. "We need to finalize this soon to maintain confidence." Helena's response was measured. "I just need a little more time to review the terms. You understand how these things go." Mauricio chuckled lightly. "Of course. But don't let overthinking hold us back, Helena. Trust is key, after all." As the call ended, Helena stared at the phone, her instincts screaming that something was terribly wrong. The office was quiet as the sun set behind the city skyline, painting the room in soft orange and gold hues. Helena sat at her desk, the day's tension still weighing heavily on her. The documents, the emails, and Lorena's words circled in her mind like a storm she couldn't escape. Roberta knocked gently on the door before stepping inside. "Lorena's still here," she said, her tone cautious. "She's willing to answer any questions you have." Helena hesitated for a moment. Bringing Lorena into the office had been a gamble, but every shred of evidence she had provided thus far had held up. With a nod, Helena motioned for Roberta to let her in. Lorena entered quietly, the same folder tucked under her arm, though her posture now seemed less guarded. Helena gestured toward the chair across from her desk. "Sit," Helena said curtly. "We need to talk." Lorena sat, her hands gripping the edges of the folder. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," Helena replied firmly. "Start from the beginning. I need to know exactly what you found, how you found it, and why you're so sure it's credible." For the next hour, Lorena walked Helena through every detail, her voice steady and unshaken. Helena listened intently, her sharp mind piecing together the fragments of a conspiracy that was larger than she had anticipated. By the end of their conversation, Helena knew one thing: Lorena was no ordinary informant. The following morning, Helena and Roberta reviewed everything Lorena had shared. The room was filled with stacks of papers, printouts, and notes hastily scrawled in the margins of contracts. "This isn't just negligence," Helena said, her voice calm but laced with anger. "This is deliberate." Roberta nodded. "It's clever, too. The language in these clauses is just vague enough to slip through initial reviews, but specific enough to cause damage once enacted." Helena tapped her pen against the table, her thoughts racing. "Mauricio didn't do this alone," she said. "He's not reckless enough to act without a network of support. We need to figure out who else is involved." Roberta hesitated before speaking. If that's the case, it might not just be Mauricio. There could be others inside the company who are complicit. Helena looked up sharply, the possibility striking her like a blow. She had spent years building a team she believed she could trust. The thought that someone on the inside might be working against her made her stomach churn. "Start investigating quietly," Helena ordered. "Go through past contracts, financial records, anything that might show a pattern. I want to know how far this goes." As Roberta left to begin her task, Helena leaned back in her chair, staring out the window. She had built Montenegro Corporation to be untouchable, yet cracks were beginning to show. And cracks, she knew, could bring down even the strongest of empires. Later that day, Helena received a call from Mauricio Lacerda, his tone smooth and confident as always. "Helena, I wanted to check in. Is everything progressing as expected with the contract?" he asked, his words carrying a practiced air of concern. Helena gripped the phone tightly, her instincts sharpening. "It's being reviewed," she replied coolly. "There are some details that need clarification." Mauricio chuckled lightly. "Details? Helena, we've been partners for years. You know I'd never present anything that wasn't perfectly aligned with your best interest." His words, once reassuring, now felt like thinly veiled manipulation. "Even so," Helena said, her tone firm, "I believe in due diligence. I'll contact you once the process is complete." "Of course," Mauricio replied smoothly. "But remember, delays could signal hesitation to the market. We wouldn't want to send the wrong message, would we?" Helena ended the call, her jaw tightening. Mauricio's subtle pressure felt deliberate, as though he were trying to corner her into action. After hanging up, she sat in silence for a moment. Roberta entered, sensing Helena's frustration. "How did it go?" "As expected," Helena said flatly. "Mauricio is as polished as ever, but I can feel the cracks in his facade. He's hiding something." Roberta nodded. "Then we'll find it." Helena exhaled sharply, her determination solidifying. "We don't just need evidence," she said. "We need to expose him on our terms." As the hours passed, Helena found herself reflecting on her relationship with Mauricio. Their partnership had spanned over a decade, built on mutual respect and shared success. He had been one of the few people she trusted implicitly, but now that trust felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter. In the quiet of her office, Helena sifted through memories. Boardroom victories, late-night strategy sessions, and celebratory dinners where Mauricio's charm and loyalty had always been on display. Was it all an act? Roberta interrupted her thoughts, stepping into the room with a file. "Helena, I've found something," she said. Helena straightened in her chair. "What is it?" Roberta placed a file on her desk. Old meeting notes from a few months ago. They mention reallocating assets in ways that align with the suspicious clauses in the current contract. It's subtle, but the language matches. Helena flipped through the file, her stomach sinking with every word. This wasn't just speculation anymore. There was a trail, faint but undeniable, leading back to Mauricio. "I need to know how deep this goes," Helena said, her voice steady but cold. "Who else was involved in those meetings?" Roberta hesitated. "That's harder to trace, but I'll keep digging." Helena nodded, her jaw tightening. "Do it quietly. If there's one thing I know about betrayal, it never happens alone." As Roberta left, Helena stared at the file, the weight of fractured trust pressing heavily on her chest. The next morning, Helena was summoned to a hastily arranged board meeting. The directors had grown restless, their confidence shaken by delays in finalizing the high-profile deal. As Helena entered the conference room, the air was thick with tension. The board members exchanged murmurs before turning their attention to her. "Helena," one of the senior directors began, "we're hearing whispers of hesitation about the deal with Mauricio Lacerda. Can you clarify the delay?" Helena, calm and poised, addressed the room. "The contract is under routine review to ensure it meets our company's standards. I won't rush a decision of this magnitude." Another director leaned forward. "The market doesn't respond well to delays. Investors are watching closely, and we need to send a message of strength." Helena felt the pressure mounting. She couldn't reveal the growing suspicions without solid evidence. but she also couldn't afford to seem indecisive. The strength of Montenegro Corporation lies in its precision and foresight, Helena said firmly. I'm ensuring that continues. The room quieted, but Helena could sense their doubts lingering. As the meeting adjourned, she left with the weight of their unspoken concerns pressing on her shoulders. Back in her office, Roberta was waiting. How did it go? She asked. Millionaire'S. They're worried, but we can't reveal anything yet. Not until we're certain. Later that day, Roberta approached Helena with a determined look. We need more help, she said. Helena raised an eyebrow. Help from who? Lorena, Roberta replied. She's sharper than we gave her credit for, and her insights could speed this up. Helena frowned, reluctant to rely further on an outsider. But deep down, she knew Roberta was right. Lorena's instincts and knowledge had already proven invaluable. Fine, Helena said at last. Bring her in. An hour later, Lorena stood in Helena's office, her worn folder clutched tightly. She looked out of place against the sleek, polished decor, but her resolve was unwavering. I need you to help Roberta dig deeper, Helena said, her tone measured. You've proven you understand the stakes, and I need results. Lorena nodded. I can do that, but I'll need access to more information. Helena hesitated before gesturing to Roberta. Give her what she needs, but discreetly. No one else can know. As Lorena and Roberta left the room together, Helena leaned back in her chair, exhaling deeply. She was placing her trust in an unlikely ally, and the stakes had never been higher. For the first time in years, she felt the vulnerability of uncertainty. Yet, amidst the unease, a flicker of hope emerged. Perhaps Lorena could help uncover the truth before it was too late. The atmosphere in the office grew heavier with each passing day. Helena's decision to delay the deal was not going unnoticed. Employees whispered in hushed tones, speculating about potential cracks in the company's once impenetrable facade. Mauricio, as smooth as ever, continued to act oblivious to the growing tension. He made casual appearances at the office, speaking with key directors and ensuring his polished reputation remained intact. But Helena wasn't fooled. Roberta, meanwhile, had noticed subtle changes. Certain directors were meeting privately with Mauricio, their conversations ending abruptly whenever she entered the room. It was as if an invisible line had been drawn, dividing loyalties within the company. Helena, Roberta said during one of their late-night discussions, some of the directors are definitely aligned with Mauricio. They're avoiding me, and I think they're trying to stall any internal reviews. Helena frowned. We'll need to move faster. I won't let him gain the upper hand. In the meantime, Lorena had quietly been working through records Roberta provided. Her sharp eye caught small inconsistencies, meetings that weren't documented properly, financial reallocations that didn't align with company goals. It's there, Lorena said one evening, pointing to a pattern on her screen. He's building a foundation to siphon control. He's just waiting for you to sign. Helena's jaw tightened. The pieces were falling into place, and the betrayal felt closer than ever. Helena's office buzzed with tension as Roberta presented Lorena's findings. This pattern isn't a coincidence, Roberta said. He's using vague language to set the stage for a complete takeover. Helena studied the documents, her expression unreadable. If this is true, we'll need irrefutable evidence, something that makes it impossible for him to deny. Lorena hesitated before speaking. There might be more. When I found the original documents, they were part of a batch that hadn't been shredded properly. There could still be useful information in their trash. Roberta raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting we dig through his garbage? Lorena shrugged. If it leads to the proof you need, isn't it worth it? Helena considered the suggestion. It was unconventional, borderline desperate, but desperate measures were becoming necessary. Do it, Helena said finally. But keep it quiet. No one can know we're taking this route. That night, Roberta and Lorena drove to a smaller office linked to Mauricio's operations. In the shadows of the city, They sifted through discarded files, their nerves on edge. Finally, Lorena pulled out a crumpled page with handwritten notes. "Look at this," she said, holding it up. The notes reference asset transfers and contingency plans that match the suspicious clauses in the contract. Roberta's heart raced. They had just found the missing link. Back in Helena's office, Roberta and Lorena laid out the crumpled page they had retrieved. Helena leaned over her desk, her sharp eyes scanning the handwritten notes. Each line was more incriminating than the last. "These references match the questionable clauses in the contract," Roberta explained. "It's clear Mauricio has been planning this for months, possibly years." Helena's face hardened. "These notes are direct evidence, but we'll need more to confront him publicly." Lorena nodded. "If he's gone this far, there's no way he's working alone. Someone inside the company is helping him." Helena's chest tightened at the thought. She had built Montenegro Corporation on trust and loyalty, yet cracks were forming in her carefully constructed empire. Roberta chimed in. "The next step is finding out who else is involved. I'll look for inconsistencies in communications and project approvals. And I'll focus on financial records," Lorena added. Helena straightened, her resolve sharpening. "We're running out of time. Mauricio is getting impatient, and the board is pressuring me to finalize the deal. We need solid evidence before he makes his next move." As they worked late into the night, Helena realized how much was at stake. Her company, her legacy, and her trust in the people closest to her all hung in the balance. The next day, Helena's suspicions about her inner circle deepened. Roberta's initial investigation into communication logs revealed several directors exchanging encrypted emails with Mauricio's team. "This can't be a coincidence," Roberta said, placing printouts on Helena's desk. "Some of the directors are clearly working with him. They've been pushing for the deal to be signed, even after you delayed it." Helena studied the names listed. Some were expected, others surprising. One name, however, stood out. Andre Tavares, a senior director who had been with the company for decades. "Andre has been loyal since the beginning," Helena said, frowning. "Why would he betray me now?" Roberta hesitated. It might not be betrayal. He could be caught in the middle or acting under pressure. "Millionaire'S, we'll need to approach him carefully. If he's on their side, he could warn Mauricio, but if he's innocent, he might help us." That evening, Helena arranged a private meeting with Andre. He arrived looking uneasy, his usual confidence replaced by something more reserved. "Andre," Helena began, "I need your honesty. Are you aware of anything unusual about this deal with Mauricio?" Andre hesitated, then leaned forward. "Helena, I've noticed things that don't sit right. If you're asking me to choose a side, I'm on yours." His words gave Helena a glimmer of hope, but she knew they still had a long way to go. The following morning, whispers of uncertainty grew louder across Montenegro Corporation. Employees sensed the strain in the air, and speculative articles about the delayed deal began to circulate online. Investors were uneasy, and Helena knew the clock was ticking. In the boardroom, tensions were palpable as the directors convened for another urgent meeting. Questions came at Helena from all sides. "Helena, the delay is damaging our market reputation," one director said sharply. "We need clarity on when this deal will close." Helena maintained her composure. "The contract requires further review to protect our company. I won't compromise due diligence for speed." Another director leaned forward, his tone skeptical. "Mauricio has been a reliable partner for years. What could possibly be taking this long?" Helena resisted the urge to reveal everything, knowing she didn't yet have the full picture. "This is about ensuring the long-term stability of our operations," she said firmly. "Trust me to lead as I always have." As the meeting ended, Helena caught Roberta's eye. They exchanged a silent understanding. Time was running out. Back in her office, Roberta delivered an update. "The encrypted emails we found might lead to a hidden server. If we can access it, we might uncover more evidence." Helena nodded. "Then do it." We're running out of chances to stay ahead of Mauricio. The walls felt as though they were closing in, but Helena was determined not to let the pressure break her resolve. Later that evening, Roberta and Lorena worked in quiet determination, their focus locked on decrypting the emails they discovered. Roberta's technical skills paired with Lorena's sharp instincts proved to be a powerful combination. "This isn't just about encrypted communication," Roberta muttered, scrolling through the files. "There's a hidden server linked to these accounts. If we can access it, we might find a trail that leads back to Mauricio." "But that's risky," Lorena replied. "If they catch us digging, it'll alert them and they could erase everything." Roberta paused. "Do we have another choice?" After a tense moment, Lorena nodded. "Let's do it." Hours passed as they navigated layers of encryption. The room was silent except for the sound of Roberta's typing and the occasional click of Lorena's pen against her folder. Finally, Roberta leaned back with a sigh of relief. "I'm in," she said, her voice a mix of triumph and exhaustion. Lorena leaned over to look at the screen. What they found was a treasure trove of incriminating files, meeting transcripts, financial plans, and emails explicitly outlining Mauricio's intentions to siphon control of Montenegro Corporation. "This is it," Lorena whispered. "This is what we need." Roberta quickly backed up the files. "Now we have to move fast. If they suspect we've found this, they'll try to shut us down." Helena's instincts had been right. Now, the evidence was undeniable, and the endgame was finally in sight. The next morning, Helena sat at her desk, reviewing the damning evidence Roberta and Lorena had uncovered. The details were explicit. Clear connections between Mauricio and several directors within her company, outlining a plan to exploit Montenegro Corporation under the guise of the New Deal. Helena's phone buzzed, interrupting her focus. Roberta's voice was urgent on the other end. "Helena, we've just been flagged. Someone tried accessing the server we pulled those files from. They might know we've uncovered something." Helena's stomach dropped. "What are the chances they'll trace it back to us?" "I can't guarantee they won't," Roberta admitted. "But they'll act fast to cover their tracks if they suspect we're onto them." "Lock everything down," Helena said firmly. "No one else in the company can know about this. We need to stay ahead." As Helena ended the call, she glanced at the files spread across her desk. Time was running out. Mauricio wasn't the type to take threats lightly, and if he realized the extent of their knowledge, he'd do everything to silence them. Gathering her composure, Helena stood and called Roberta back. "Set up a meeting with the board and Mauricio. It's time to force his hand, but we do this on my terms." The stage was set, and Helena knew the next move could determine the fate of her empire. Later that afternoon, Helena stood in the boardroom, her expression calm but steely. The directors were gathered, their murmurs of confusion silenced as Mauricio entered, his trademark charm on full display. "Helena," Mauricio said with a smile, "I wasn't expecting a meeting so soon. I hope this means we're ready to finalize the deal." Helena gestured for him to take a seat. "Not quite," she replied, her tone icy. "There are a few issues we need to address first." Mauricio's smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "Of course. I'm happy to clarify any concerns." As the meeting began, Helena kept her cards close. She subtly introduced questions about the contract's vague clauses, watching Mauricio's responses carefully. "You've always been thorough, Helena," he said smoothly. "I can assure you everything is in order. These terms are standard for a deal of this scale." But Helena noticed the small cracks in his facade, the slight hesitation in his answers, the way his eyes flickered toward the other directors as if seeking reassurance. Roberta, sitting nearby, discreetly passed Helena a note. "He's deflecting." Helena nodded subtly, her resolve solidifying. She wasn't ready to reveal everything yet, but she could feel the tension rising. The meeting wasn't over, and the balance of power was beginning to shift. As the meeting continued, Helena pressed Mauricio with sharper questions, her calm tone belying the intensity of her words. "Why weren't these specific liability clauses discussed during our initial negotiations?" she asked, holding up a highlighted portion of the contract. Mauricio smiled tightly. "Those clauses are meant to ensure flexibility in unforeseen circumstances. They're nothing unusual." Helena leaned back, her expression unreadable. "Flexibility for whom, exactly?" These terms seemed to shift all the risk to my company. The room grew quiet, the directors exchanging uneasy glances. Mauricio's polished facade began to crack. "With all due respect, Helena," he said, his voice slightly strained, "this level of scrutiny seems excessive. We've worked together for years. Surely, you know my intentions are aligned with the success of Montenegro Corporation." Helena didn't flinch. "Intention doesn't override transparency, Mauricio. This isn't about trust, it's about facts." The tension in the room was palpable. Some directors looked uncomfortable, while others seemed intrigued by Helena's assertiveness. Mauricio's confidence visibly wavered, but he maintained his composure. As the meeting wrapped up, Helena stood. "We'll need more time before moving forward. Roberta will circulate a revised timeline." Mauricio nodded stiffly, though the glint in his eye suggested he was far from conceding. Helena knew she had rattled him. Now! It was only a matter of time before he made a misstep. Back in her office, Helena wasted no time. She called Roberta and Lorena to review the evidence they had collected. "We're close," Helena said, spreading the incriminating files across her desk. "But we need something undeniable to force Mauricio's hand in front of the board." Lorena leaned over the documents, her sharp eyes scanning the patterns they had uncovered. "What about these?" she asked, pointing to a series of emails. "They mention off-the-books meetings. If we can find proof of what was discussed, it could seal the case." Roberta nodded. "There's one more thing we haven't checked yet. The recent financial adjustments Mauricio's team requested. They were flagged as unusual but approved under the radar." Helena's jaw tightened. "Dig into those records. If there's money being moved improperly, it'll be the final piece we need." Hours later, Roberta returned with a grim expression. "I found it. They've funneled funds through a shell company tied to one of Mauricio's associates. It's all connected." Helena exhaled sharply. "That's it then. We present this to the board. No more games." Lorena hesitated. "You realize he'll fight back, right? He won't go down without a fight." Helena's gaze hardened. "Let him try. We've got the truth on our side, and now we're ready to expose it." The countdown to confrontation had begun. The night before the board meeting, Helena sat in her office, surrounded by the evidence they had collected. The tension in the air was almost suffocating, but she forced herself to focus. Tomorrow, everything would be laid bare. Roberta entered quietly, holding a cup of coffee. "You should rest," she said softly. Helena shook her head. "There's no time for that. We need to make sure every detail is airtight. Mauricio won't hesitate to counterattack." Roberta sat across from her. "The evidence is solid, Helena. He won't have a leg to stand on once we present it." Helena looked down at the files, her mind flashing back to years of trust and partnership with Mauricio. The betrayal still stung, but she knew sentiment couldn't cloud her judgment now. "Lorena's on her way with the final documents," Roberta added. Helena nodded, grateful for the unexpected ally Lorena had become. Despite her initial doubts, the young woman had proven invaluable. When Lorena arrived, she laid the final pieces of evidence on the table. "Everything's ready," she said. Helena took a deep breath. "Tomorrow we end this." The room fell silent as the three women prepared for the confrontation ahead, their determination unshakable. The next morning, the boardroom was tense as the directors gathered. Mauricio arrived with his usual charm, greeting everyone as if nothing were amiss. Helena stood at the head of the table, her expression unreadable. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "Today, we'll be addressing concerns regarding the proposed deal. Mauricio's smile faltered slightly, but remained fixed. I'm happy to clarify any concerns, Helena. She gestured to Roberta, who began distributing copies of the evidence. The room fell into a hush as the directors scanned the documents, emails, financial records, and notes detailing Mauricio's plans to exploit Montenegro Corporation. These documents outline a coordinated effort to undermine this company, Helena said, her voice steady but firm. Mauricio has been leveraging this deal to position himself for control over our assets. Mauricio's face darkened. These accusations are baseless, he said sharply. This is a misunderstanding at best. Helena stepped forward, holding up the financial records. Explain the shell company tied to your associate, Mauricio, or the undisclosed meetings. Misunderstandings don't leave paper trails. The room grew tense as the directors murmured among themselves. For the first time, Mauricio's confidence wavered. This isn't over, he said coldly, his mask slipping. Helena's gaze didn't falter. Oh, it is. And the evidence will speak for itself. The room was silent, save for the rustling of papers and the low murmurs of the directors. Mauricio's once commanding presence was now overshadowed by Helena's unwavering composure. One of the senior directors cleared his throat. Mauricio, these documents are troubling. Is there any explanation for this? Mauricio straightened in his chair, his polished demeanor cracking. This is a coordinated attempt to discredit me, he said firmly. Helena has misunderstood the intent behind these clauses and financial adjustments. Helena raised an eyebrow. Misunderstood? The shell company tied to your associate isn't a misunderstanding, nor are the emails discussing asset reallocation. Another director leaned forward, frowning. Mauricio, if there's no truth to these accusations, why weren't these meetings disclosed to the board? Mauricio faltered. His usual charm seemed to fail him as the weight of the evidence pressed down. The directors exchanged uneasy glances, their trust in him visibly eroding. Helena seized the moment. This isn't just about protecting my company. It's about protecting all of us from someone willing to exploit our trust. The silence was deafening. Mauricio's allies began to distance themselves, realizing the gravity of the situation. As the meeting adjourned, Helena knew she had struck a critical blow. Mauricio's once solid alliances were beginning to crumble. After the meeting, Mauricio requested a private conversation with Helena. She agreed, knowing this was his attempt to salvage what little control he had left. In her office, he closed the door behind him, his demeanor cold and calculated. You think you've won, he said quietly, but you've made a powerful enemy today. Helena met his gaze unflinching. This isn't about winning, Mauricio. It's about integrity, something you seem to have forgotten. Mauricio stepped closer, his tone sharp. You don't understand the game you're playing, Helena. People like me don't lose easily. Helena leaned back in her chair, her expression calm. That's where you're wrong. You've already lost. The evidence is overwhelming and the board no longer trusts you. He smirked, though it lacked its usual confidence. You think this will end me? I have connections far beyond this company. Helena's voice was firm. You may have connections, but they won't protect you from the truth. And now, everyone knows who you really are. Mauricio stared at her for a long moment before turning toward the door. This isn't the last you'll hear from me, he said, his voice low. As the door closed behind him, Helena exhaled deeply. She had stood her ground, but she knew the battle wasn't over yet. The boardroom's silence lingered long after Mauricio had left. The directors sat in uneasy reflection, shuffling through the evidence that Helena had presented. Trust, once the cornerstone of their relationship with Mauricio, had been shattered. Helena returned to the room, her posture firm but her exhaustion visible to those paying attention. Ladies and gentlemen, you've seen the facts. I trust you understand the gravity of the situation. One director, who had been an outspoken supporter of Mauricio, hesitated before speaking. Helena, this evidence is damning, but the company's reputation is on the line. How do you intend to handle this? Helena's gaze swept across the table. Transparency will be our guiding principle. We'll conduct a full investigation, address any gaps in oversight, and rebuild the trust of our stakeholders. Montenegro Corporation will emerge stronger. The directors exchanged nods, some reluctantly, others with renewed confidence. Helena knew this was only the beginning of the cleanup process, but it was a necessary step to protect everything she had built. As the meeting ended, Roberta approached her. The board seems to be on your side now, but Mauricio won't go quietly. I'm counting on it, Helena replied. Let him try. We're prepared. Walking back to her office, Helena felt a flicker of relief. She had won the first battle, but the war wasn't over yet. The next day, the story broke in the media. Headlines detailed the attempted sabotage within Montenegro Corporation, naming Mauricio as the orchestrator of the scheme. News outlets painted a picture of betrayal and high-stakes corporate drama. Helena watched the coverage from her office, her expression unreadable. This wasn't the kind of publicity she had ever wanted, but it was unavoidable. The truth had to come out. Roberta entered the room, her phone in hand. Investors are calling nonstop. Most are concerned, but a few are applauding your decision to expose this before it escalated further. Helena nodded. We need to get ahead of this narrative. Schedule a press conference. I want to address this personally. Hours later, Helena stood at the podium, cameras flashing as reporters shouted questions. She raised a hand, silencing the crowd. Today, I want to reaffirm Montenegro Corporation's commitment to integrity and transparency, she began. While the actions of one individual sought to undermine our foundation, we have taken swift measures to ensure this company remains a pillar of trust in the industry. Her speech was concise yet powerful, emphasizing accountability and the steps being taken to prevent future betrayals. As she stepped away from the podium, Roberta met her with a small smile. You handled that perfectly. Helena allowed herself a moment to exhale. For the first time in weeks, she felt the weight begin to lift. The press conference had barely concluded when Helena returned to her office, where Roberta and Lorena were waiting. Roberta offered a reassuring smile, but it was Lorena's quiet presence that drew Helena's attention. You've been invaluable in this, Helena said, directing her words to Lorena. I never thought I'd be saying this, but without your determination, I might not have seen the truth in time. Lorena's cheeks reddened slightly. I didn't want to stand by and watch someone get away with this. Helena gestured for Lorena to sit. Your instincts and knowledge have been remarkable. You've proven that brilliance can come from the most unexpected places. I'd like to offer you an official position here. Lorena's eyes widened. Are you serious? I don't even have a degree. That doesn't matter, Helena replied firmly. You've shown a capacity to learn and adapt under pressure. We'll support you if you want to continue your education, but your contributions here are already undeniable. Lorena hesitated, her fingers gripping the edges of her chair. I never imagined someone like you would give me a chance. Helena smiled slightly. Sometimes, it takes someone from the outside to see what those on the inside overlook. For the first time in a long while, Lorena felt like her life had shifted towards something brighter. As the dust settled, Helena turned her focus to repairing the damage within Montenegro Corporation. The betrayal had shaken the company to its core, and she knew the only way forward was to rebuild trust, both internally and externally. She began with her team, holding a series of meetings to address their concerns. I know the situation has left many of you questioning the integrity of our leadership, she said during one meeting. But I promise you, we're taking every step necessary to prevent this from happening again. Her honesty was met with cautious optimism. Employees who had once feared the consequences of speaking up now felt emboldened by Helena's renewed commitment to transparency. Externally, Helena launched a comprehensive audit of the company's practices. Independent firms were brought in to review operations and identify vulnerabilities. The move reassured investors and signaled that Montenegro Corporation was determined to emerge stronger. Roberta, as always, worked tirelessly by her side. "The board seems to be regaining faith in your leadership," she noted during one late-night meeting. Helena nodded. "Good, but we can't stop here. Trust is fragile, and we've only just begun to repair it." As the company began to stabilize, Helena reflected on how much she had learned. The road ahead was long, but she was ready to lead with renewed purpose and vigilance. With the chaos beginning to subside, Helena found herself reflecting on the unexpected alliances forged throughout the ordeal. Roberta's loyalty had been unwavering, and Lorena's sharp instincts had proven invaluable. They were reminders that strength often came from the most unlikely places. One evening, as Helena reviewed a finalized report from the independent auditors, Roberta entered with an update. "The team has identified a few more discrepancies in past contracts. Nothing as severe as Mauricio's scheme, but enough to warrant concern." Helena nodded. "Flag them for further review. We can't afford to overlook anything moving forward." Roberta hesitated for a moment before speaking. "You know, Lorena has been remarkable during all of this. Her ability to see patterns in these contracts is almost uncanny." Helena smiled faintly. "She's been a revelation. I don't think I've ever underestimated someone as much as I did her, and I won't make that mistake again." The next day, Helena called Lorena into her office. "I want you to be part of the new compliance team we're forming," she said. Lorena blinked in surprise. "Me? I don't know if I'm qualified for something like that." "You've already proven you are," Helena replied. "Your perspective is exactly what this company needs." As Lorena left the office, her heart swelled with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. For the first time, she could see a future full of possibilities. While the company began to recover, Helena focused on addressing the residual effects of Mauricio's betrayal. Internally, employees were still wary, and externally, the markets were watching Montenegro Corporation's every move. At an executive meeting, Helena laid out her strategy. "We need to rebuild our culture from the ground up," she said, her tone resolute. "Transparency and accountability will define everything we do moving forward." The executives nodded, but Helena could sense their lingering doubts. Trust wasn't something that could be restored overnight. Meanwhile, Lorena worked closely with Roberta to analyze past contracts. Together, they uncovered minor discrepancies that revealed subtle patterns of carelessness within the company's systems. These findings fueled Helena's determination to strengthen oversight and prevent future vulnerabilities. One evening, Roberta approached Helena with an idea. "What if we hosted a company-wide forum? A chance for employees to voice their concerns directly to leadership." Helena considered it. "It's risky. People might air grievances that we're not prepared to address." "Maybe," Roberta admitted, "but it also shows we're serious about change." Helena nodded slowly. "Let's do it. If we want to rebuild trust, we have to be willing to listen." The decision marked a turning point for Montenegro Corporation. For the first time in years, employees felt empowered, and Helena knew they were finally on the path to healing. Helena's decision to host a company-wide forum was met with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Employees weren't used to such transparency from the top, but the invitation felt genuine. On the day of the event, the auditorium buzzed with anticipation as Helena stepped onto the stage. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her tone steady yet inviting. "I know the past weeks have been challenging for everyone. Mistakes were made, trust was broken, and it's my responsibility to ensure we move forward together." She paused, scanning the room. "Today is about listening. I want to hear your concerns, your ideas, and your perspectives. Montenegro Corporation isn't just a name on a building, it's all of us." One by one, employees stood to speak. Some addressed operational inefficiencies, while others voiced frustrations about past leadership practices. Helena listened intently, taking notes and occasionally responding with a promise to follow up. By the end of the session, the mood had shifted. Employees felt heard, and Helena had gained valuable insights into the company's internal struggles. After the forum, Roberta approached her. "That went better than I expected," she said with a smile. Helena nodded. "It's a start, but we still have a long way to go." The event marked a significant step in restoring the company's image, not just to the public, but to the people who made it thrive. As Montenegro Corporation moved forward, Mauricio's fate was sealed. The evidence Helena had presented triggered an investigation that uncovered a web of financial misconduct spanning years. The media pounced on the story, turning Mauricio into a symbol of greed and corruption. Headlines detailed his schemes, and former allies distanced themselves, unwilling to risk their reputations. Helena watched the developments unfold with a mix of relief and resolve. She had won the battle, but the scars of betrayal remained. One morning, Roberta entered her office holding a printed news article. "It's official. Mauricio has been indicted on multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. He's facing serious prison time." Helena took the article, her expression unreadable. "Good. Justice needs to be served." Despite the victory, she felt no satisfaction in Mauricio's downfall. What had once been a trusted partnership had devolved into betrayal, leaving behind a bitter taste. Roberta studied her carefully. "You did the right thing, Helena. The company is stronger because of your decisions." Helena nodded slowly. "Perhaps, but there's no celebrating when trust is broken like this. All we can do now is ensure it never happens again." As Mauricio's name faded from the headlines, Montenegro Corporation emerged stronger, its renewed focus on integrity, setting a standard for others to follow. With the chaos behind them, Helena turned her attention to the people who had helped her through the storm. Lorena, in particular, had proven to be a remarkable asset. Her sharp instincts and determination had been crucial in uncovering the truth, and Helena felt it was time to reward her in a meaningful way. One afternoon, Helena invited Lorena into her office. The young woman entered cautiously, still unaccustomed to the grandeur of her surroundings. "Have a seat," Helena said, her tone warmer than usual. "I want to discuss your future." Lorena hesitated. "My future?" "Yes," Helena replied. "You've shown extraordinary potential, and I believe you deserve an opportunity to develop your skills further. I've arranged for you to receive a full scholarship to pursue a degree in law. If you accept, Montenegro Corporation will sponsor you, and you'll have a position here waiting for you when you're ready." Lorena's eyes widened, her voice catching in her throat. "I don't know what to say. I never thought something like this could happen to me." Helena smiled. "You earned it. Your hard work and integrity are exactly what this company needs." Tears welled up in Lorena's eyes as she nodded. "Thank you. I won't let you down." As Lorena left the office, her heart was full of hope. For the first time, she felt like her life was truly beginning. Months passed, and Montenegro Corporation found itself on stable ground once again. The changes Helena had implemented, transparency, oversight, and renewed collaboration, were bearing fruit. Morale was higher, and the company's reputation was steadily recovering. Helena stood in her office, gazing out at the bustling city below. The events of the past months had changed her. She was no longer the same woman who had trusted blindly, relying on old alliances and assuming her empire was untouchable. Roberta entered the room, interrupting her thoughts. "We've just received the latest market report. Investors are impressed with the turnaround. Montenegro Corporation is stronger than ever." Helena turned to her with a faint smile. "Good. Let's make sure it stays that way." Roberta hesitated before speaking again. "And Lorena? Have you heard from her since she started her classes?" Helena's smile widened slightly. "She emails me updates every week. She's thriving." The thought brought a sense of pride that Helena hadn't expected. Lorena's success was a reminder that resilience and opportunity could change lives, and that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the most unexpected sources. As Helena returned to her desk, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The company was not just her legacy, but a testament to growth, perseverance, and the power of second chances. With that, she was ready to face whatever came next. Enjoy the story. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Share your thoughts in the comments and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next thrilling episode. See you in our next video. Take care.